Welcome, everybody, to the Tabletop Express. We are here for Is This Game for You? And I'm joined again by Brian Chandler. Brian, welcome back to the Express.
Hey, Chris. Good evening. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So if you missed it, Brian joined me about a month and a half, it might even be 2 months ago now, for a great roundtable on accessibility, and it was fantastic. We were joined by Eric Slauson, Peter McPherson. It was just a really great chat. So really excited to have Brian back, and Brian's joining me because he has played the game we're going to talk about today, and that game is nothing more than the Isle of Cats. And the Isle of Cats is a great game for me, but the thing that we're going to talk about tonight is this game for you? So let's talk a little bit about the Isle of Cats. What is this game? First and foremost, I like to cover a little bit about what they're saying on Board Game Geek with all these games. Overall, this is actually 104. Strategy, it's number 81. And family ranking is 10. So some high regards on this. This is designed by Frank West, who, if you missed it, was on Creators Corner just a week ago at this exact same time. Now, the Isle of Cats is about a medium weight game. It's a competitive game. And here's the story. You are a citizen of Squall's End on a rescue mission to the Isle of Cats, and you must rescue as many cats as possible before the evil Lord Vesh arrives. Now, apparently, I've read a few things about Lord Vesh. He really wants to destroy the world, but we're going to go save these cats. And each of these cats is represented by some unique tiles. And you are basically going to try and get these cats, bring them over to your boat, and you're going to do a few things along the way, because along the way, you're also going to get lesson cards, which give you unique ways of scoring points. Now, this game, because of that, is very unique. It's very different, and it's very replayable. I got to give a lot of credit to that, but we're going to get into all those topics. First and foremost, I got to ask you, Brian, when you think about the theme of this game, what was your takeaway when you first played it?
I really like it. It's cute. It's interesting. I think the colored cats in a lot of different colors is something that stood out to me. I think that's cool. Even though I'm colorblind, I still love colors. And so seeing that was cool. And just the general, obviously you're trying to get victory points at the end of the day, right? It's a board game. But the concept or the theme of, hey, if I can Tetromino these guys into my boat in the best way, I can save more of these cats from their potential plight. And so that's enough theme for me.
That's the part of it. It's the rescuing the cats. That when we talk about the theme, that is I like to give that whole backstory. But in the end, that is the big thing. But let's talk about components. You mentioned those components. First and foremost, there's a lot of pieces in this game. There's a lot of cardboard. But the focus point I first want to bring up, in particularly because you're with me, is these cats and some of the other components in this game, and the way that they're actually color coded, so to speak, or how actually not they're color coded, but they've been made accessible regardless of the colors that you see.
Yeah, so I just completed a colorblind review of this game a few days ago. You can see it at colorblindgames.com. And one of the things that is just really, really cool about this, and I had a chance to talk with Frank about it and get some thoughts from him, is the way that he made the game colorblind accessible. So you can see both in terms of the tiles, like I'll hold a couple up here. You may or may not be able to see that well, but these are the red and green cats. And the thing about the cats that is really cool is Frank didn't just put, say, squares on the green cats and triangles on the red cats, although that's very helpful sometimes for folks like me as well. But the designs themselves, the green cats have spiky tails, the red cats have fluffier tails. You can see that even translates all the way to the meeples. These are the 5 different color cats have 5 different styles of meeple. And if you look very closely, even though the purple and blue cats both have kind of similar-ish tails, the purple cats have longer spiky ears or tall ears, and the blue cats have rounded little ears. And that translates to the cards, that translates to the tiles. And then also translates to the player aids. And these player aids aren't for everybody. Chris doesn't need these player aids for this game, right? Most people don't. The 5% of people in the world who do need this player aid has it. And so I can see both, you can see on the left side there, an additional guide or some information about, I can call the cat the red cat. I can call the cat the blue cat. I don't have to call it the striped tail cat like I might in some other games. I get to just call it the blue cat because I have these player aids in front of me, even if nobody else at my table needs the aids in front of them. And then similar with the treasure maps, you can see there's these 5 different treasure maps in the colors as well. They have icons on them that help me to be able to tell what they are, but I can call them out as the purple map. I don't have to call it out as the map that has the certain design on it. And that's like the next level here. I'm really excited about what Frank and the graphic and artists were able to do on this game and be able to bring accessibility to us in a way that frankly can be kind of hidden and subtle. I don't need to hit anybody over the head with colorblind accessibility, and this is a perfect way to subtly do it. Some families won't even need these cards at all. They can just leave them in the box. But for those of us who are benefited by them, it's a huge benefit to be able to play the game without having to ask a lot of questions, or in some cases, not be able to play it at all.
Yeah, and the other thing is you held up some of the cardboard pieces. There's a lot of these, by the way. There's a lot of these cats. It's a polyomino game. So here's a few things we should get out of the way. In terms of the main components of this game, it's the polyomino pieces, it's the cards, and it's the cats themselves, and then some of these player boards, which we'll show you in a moment. But the components with these cards, I think it's critical. There are a lot of these cards. They're really cool looking, and as you've already noted, you can kind of you can understand what's going on with this. The components in this, we should note, there's a variety of these types of cards. There's anytime cards, there's these rescue cards, there's these treasure cards, and then there's lessons. But what I should point out is you can see in this photo, there's lessons and there's public lessons. So your end game points for this game in particular, I think it's really interesting because sometimes you'll have that public lesson that you end up having to put out, but your opponents are going to have these private lessons. So every game definitely has a little bit of a different feeling to it, and that's great. We'll talk more to replayability as we go on.
And just a quick note on that, Chris, on those cards is at the bottom of those, if you look really closely, even though they are color coded, the bottom tells you what type of card they are. And so I don't need to, and in fact, you probably wouldn't call these cards by their color. You would actually call them by their name. So you might know the cards by their name by seeing the color. I know the cards by their name by reading the name on the bottom. And so it's just a cool.
And that's a good point. And I think that that's one thing that this game, again, did really well. It's very easy to kind of figure out what you need to do. Now, gameplay-wise, what's really interesting, we're going to bring you 2 perspectives on this tonight. Brian has played this solo. I see Danielle is here, and she's actually not surprising that Danielle's got some thoughts. I love when you're here, Danielle. How are you? Knowing now this game was designed with accessibility in mind makes me love the game even more. Yeah, I agree. Danielle's going to like it, though, because you can speak to solo. I'm going to speak a little bit more to a 3-player game. I'm the first to say I have not played this game like 10 times over. So these are very initial first thoughts, what you're getting from me. So I think it'll be helpful for those looking, am I going to like this? I'm going to have a pretty fresh approach on this. But let's talk about that. I'm going to go a little bit through some of these pieces that we didn't see as we talk about gameplay. This is your player board. You want to fill in this player board. And you mentioned the icons earlier. You can see the different areas where you want to build these families of cats and you want to have them filled in. They're marked with those icons as noted. And if you look at the bottom left, as I bring this front and center, you'll see in the bottom left that all the different ways you score are noted here. All the different aspects that help with that. And that's a few things. That's losing points for rats. That's making sure you have your rooms filled. You want to make sure all your rooms are filled. There's exceptions to that, ironically. Cat families are going to be based on how many families of cats you have connected together. And you can see a chart to the right. And then you've got your rare treasures, your lessons, and your public lessons. So every game has a lot of different things going on. There's definitely a point salad of points opportunities. But when it comes down to it, it's very clear from the beginning. And this player board looks really cool on the table. You're going to be filling this up with polyominoes. And then I'll actually go ahead and show you that right here. But yeah, this is just really cool. There we are. And so you can see these polyominoes. I know this is your photo, so I'm going to let you actually speak a little bit to kind of the gameplay from the solo perspective. And then we can get into the main, the 3-player, the main way a lot of people, I think, end up playing, but I think solo playing is obviously a major factor here. So I want to start with solo.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, first of all, just the inherent nature of how satisfying it is to nestle these polyominoes together, right? I'm older, grew up playing original Tetris, or not original Tetris, but for me, original Tetris on the original Game Boy in the late 80s and early 90s. And so that chunk feeling of having the pieces just fit just right in any, whether it's an Uwe Rosenberg game or others, is just in and of itself has some satisfaction. And the addition here is that you're bringing these cats together and they are having the same colors touching each other gives you additional points. And so there's some value there. In solo modes usually look to me are kind of three different ways. Either a solo mode in a game that is designed to be maybe primarily a multiplayer game either gives you a kind of a score chase situation where you're just trying to beat your best score over and over and over. An automa situation where the game is trying to replicate the multiplayer game with a deck of cards or some way to automate another player, or it's using those same components and creating either mildly or sometimes an entirely different game using the same components that are in the box for solo mode. And the Isle of Cats is kind of a combination of an automa and a different game. And so it's different enough that I think it would be interesting for somebody who's played the base game a lot. It wouldn't just feel like a not quite as good version of the multiplayer game, which sometimes can happen, I think, when it's just automa. And on the other hand, I feel like I've primarily played the solo, yet I feel like I know the game well enough that I could play multiplayer and I wouldn't need to totally relearn the game. So it's a nice little kind of a piece in the middle there of addressing those two. I really enjoyed it. There's also some theme around the solo mode of you're actually on the boat now with your sister, and your sister's also trying to like get glory by rescuing these cats. And so now there's this kind of weird altruistic rescuing the cats, but also doing it better than your sister. And so that's like, again, enough theme for me. I can
relate to trying to do something better than my sister. So
there you go. Absolutely.
So speaking to playing with many players, what's great about this, a few things you need to know. And I think it's important that we go through here. As you look at the board, there's a few things that's happened. This board's in the middle of the table. You've got some cats on each side. It costs 3 fish to buy the ones on the left, 5 fish to buy the ones on the right. And normally you'd have treasures, common treasures below. You're going to start each round, and there are 5 rounds, with a deck of cards. You're going to go pick 2, not 1, 2 cards. You're going to pick what you want to keep, put it down, pass the cards until all the cards are gone and everyone has cards. You've got to play your cards, obviously, in the legal way, obviously there, but there's cards that allow anytime play. So I mentioned this earlier. An anytime card can be played at any time. Now, Brian, if you and I both go to play an anytime card, it depends where we are on the on that kind of that ladder of cat footprints there, which I'll kind of get into. The other piece of this is on your cards, you've got a few things. You've got essentially these boxes, some that are full and some are half full, that are kind of a broken piece, and you need 2 broken pieces to have a full one, obviously. And there's boots. You're going to, from your set of cards, have a speed and have an X amount of boxes. You start with a permanent box, but you need these boxes to collect cats and bring them back to your ship. So you're not just going to be picking your cards based on the cool actions that go from them or the scoring. You're going to be picking them based on the fact that you might want to go first, because that polyomino piece that you want, you really need that yellow cat. And if a bunch of people go ahead of you and grab all the yellow cats, you're done, right? So that's a really neat. The drafting in it is really well done. If you've played a Sushi Go or something like that, you're going to be fairly familiar with this basic form of drafting, except you're drafting 2 cards instead of 1. As we go through our turns, we're going in that turn order, playing and going through and doing our things. And then in the long run, as we play this game, we'll complete a round, redraw back up, and do it all over again. The action in the middle that's important to most people is the playing of those cats, because there's obviously multiple things we're doing within the rounds. And the big thing is playing the cards and ultimately getting the cats to our ship. We get the cats to our ship and place them down. They have to touch. This is the big piece. They got to touch. So you can't have something that gets put on one corner of the ship and something on the complete other corner of the ship unless a card gives you that exception. So you're trying to collect the right cats for that reason. So it can be a challenging game, but again, like most polyomino games, there's just those basic connection rules that you have to keep in mind. And as we noted earlier, and I'm going to actually go back here, if you look at this board, there's 5 areas in here. And you do lose points at the end of the game if you don't, for every area you don't fill in. So you need to fill in all those respective areas as best as possible. I'll say I was not very good at filling in the whole ship, but I did pretty good job of filling in most of it. I definitely had some exposed areas. 5 rounds does not seem like a lot of time, but you can get a lot more done, I'd say, in 5 rounds than you expect. You did solo. So I don't know how replayable you felt it was in a solo mode, but I want to start with you in terms of that replayability from the solo perspective. Is it something you'd enjoy doing over and over again? Is it something that you might put aside for a little bit and come back? Where did it play in that area for you?
I actually think a little bit of both. I mean, you talked about the cards. The cards are really where the replayability comes. And I think the fact that, I mean, I don't know how many actual unique tetrominoes there are, but these polyominoes aren't just Tetris pieces, right? They're weird. And they even get, there's a special kind of cat that's even weirder. I think it's like 7 different squares. And so there's a lot. So I think just because of that, and you're pulling them out of the bag, and so you've got the randomness of what cats come out of the bag that are laid out every game. And that deck of cards is big. I mean, I think this is only half of the deck that I've got. So it's basically twice this big. And in a solo game, you might imagine you don't go through that many cards. And so you're not going through, probably not going to go through half the deck in a solo play. And so because of that, you've only seen, half the deck. And then of course you reshuffle it up, you're going to see some of those cards again on another play. And I know I don't have, but I think there is an expansion that adds even more cards. And so I think there's definitely some room. I mean, this thing could last you a long time. I think both in terms of solo mode and then I'm guessing multiplayer as well.
I'm glad you mentioned there is the Ashix, I believe is how you say it, cat that you try to befriend. There's limited numbers of these, and that one is a special cat. The other thing that's worth noting actually is just in terms of uniqueness. I mentioned lesson cards earlier. I just did a double check while we were chatting here, and there's 38 unique lessons available in the base game. So there's 38 unique. So the lessons, 38 in terms of scoring, that brings a ton of replayability. So
yeah, absolutely.
So
I just want to, I'm going to show, this is the weird cats, or whatever you call them. So they have even more. So there's and those get hard. Those can score you a lot of points. And as you might imagine, they're a lot more difficult to squeeze in, especially as you get into the later rounds to try to squeeze them onto your bow. Because if I remember right, unless there's a card that allows you to do so, you really can never move or remove any cats once they're on your boat. So you're creating your own limitations.
I never ran into a card that allowed me to move anything, but there may be one in there. So again, I have played the game one time. This is a very recent gameplay. But that is a great point. I think the neat thing about this is, look, there's 5 key actions, and look, you can find this if you do your research on Board Game Geek or any other place, but there's really 5 key things happening in this game. You're exploring the island, you're rescuing cats, you're finding treasures, which are worth money if they're the rare treasures. Common treasures are just worth filling up your ship, which you do want to do because some of them are the right shapes. And then you're studying ancient lessons, which is, again, your end game points. The scoring in this game can get crazy depending on the cards you got. The scoring is always going to be different in that sense, I think, but the way you're going to play the game is extremely different every game. So for me, I give very high marks on replayability. When we talk about this game and replayability, I go back and I'm going to just talk about these cards. These cards over that way. There they are. There they are. Those cards. That's the key to me. You talked about it. I'm just going to repeat it. The card drafting in this game is great. There's a hidden victory points thing going on. This game is a lot of fun. So for me, it gets a lot of points with my family. And this is, as I noted, ranked 10th, I believe. 10th for family rankings of Board Game Geek. That's not a small accomplishment, especially considering some of the games in that category.
And it's also brand new, right? It came out last year. So to be able to rise to the top, or maybe 2019?
2019. And
Okay.
just to give you all some perspective on this one, number 1 on that list is Wingspan, 2 is Everdell, 3 is The Crew, 4 is Azul, 5 is, oh, if Ryan Espin's wishing, his favorite game of flicking discs and trick shots is on there. I don't even need to say it. Quacks of Quedlinburg, Clank, the deck building adventure, which I was surprised by, 7 Wonders, and Lost Runes of Arnik, which is the hotness, is currently sitting at 9, apparently. But yeah, again, for me, when I think about this game and I think about replayability, there's only one other thing I have to point out before we get the final thoughts on that replayability, and that's this. The inside of box. Look, I had Frank on and I did not have a photo of this, and I was very annoyed with myself. Inside the box is your cat stuff. If you have a pet cat, you should place it here while playing the Isle of Cats. I don't actually recommend that, but my knowledge of cats is they move around, so it's probably a bad idea if you put your cat near the table. But I just love this little thought of doing this. I just think it's funny, and I had to bring that up. Nice big inside of a box as soon as you open it.
And I think it's thematic in terms of just the vibe of it's a very whimsical, cute game. These are not realistic looking cats like, other cat based games. No. These are silly, crazy red and blue and purple cats with spiky tails. And I think that kind of the cartoonish nature of it really kind of shows through. So I like that part as well.
Well, I want to talk a little bit final thoughts. And this is this game for you? And if you're watching this, be it live or be it later, is this game for you is the question we want to answer. I will speak from a family perspective first. I think if you've got, relatively young, we're not talking toddlers, but, young kids, they're going to pick up this game. They'll be a lot of fun with it. As you even go up the scale, many I know whom I've spoken to about this game who are avid gamers love the game. Just think it's a ton of fun. In terms of polyominoes, it's one of the most popular ones as I'm talking to people. So for me, I think if you like card drafting, because card drafting is heavy in this game, you have to, if you dislike card drafting, this is not a game for you. But if you like card drafting and the idea of using cards to potentially, to kind of gain your advantage to get the right pieces, you're going to love this game. But if you don't, the obvious is if you don't like polyominoes or you don't like card drafting, no, you're not going to like this game. But I think a key piece here is the card drafting, because it's very easy to look at the polyominoes in this game and say, well, I love polyominoes. But the card drafting, which I think is really well done because you're taking 2 instead of 1, which is giving you a little bit more options and a little bit more control, I think, of your situation, is if you've never done even a card drafting game, all that much, I think this is a great one to try, because I think you might like this more of a one where you actually draw 1 card. That 1 card difference for me actually makes a difference in the overall strategy I'm taking, because sometimes, a bit more often than not, I was able to kind of pair some thoughts and ideas of what I was going to do. So for me, those are some of the people who are going to like this game.
Yeah, I wanted to riff off of the card drafting thing, because there's a version of card drafting in the solo mode as well. The thing I found, though, is the fact that you have to take 2 cards, if I remember the rules correctly, because sometimes it gets you stuck. Like, one nice thing about drafting games sometimes is you only have to take that 1 card and you get to pass along the crap you don't want. In this case, you may have 3 cards, none of which you want, and you must take 2 of them. And so I think that can also be like additional puzzle you have to work around then, because maybe you've taken more stuff that you don't want than you typically would. So I think that the thing that I really think about with this, and another game that comes to mind, obviously because of cats, is Calico. But the other thing that I think is similar is that Calico is a surprisingly thinky, complex game that can really hurt your brain in a good way. And I think that this one can too. And I think even though it's way up there on the family games, man, I would bring this to a legit, 30 to 40 to 50-year-old people game night too. Like it really does work on your brain in that way. And so I think sometimes there can be this, because I wouldn't call it a mismatch, because I think you're right. I think it is great for families. And I don't even know that I like any of these categories, but anyway, but I guess I would say, don't think that because it's got cartoony cat graphics that it won't keep you busy. Like, I wouldn't even want to call it a filler game, because it's bigger and longer and more meaty than that. And I just want to be sure that folks, just because it's not trading oil and cotton or whatever in the wherever they do that in Europe somewhere, that it still can get your brain bending in a way that I think is really cool. So from a solo perspective, combined with, I guess, from a vision or any kind of accessibility issue you may have, especially related to visual accessibility, I think it's fantastic. And so I would say if you're someone who sometimes struggles to find solo games that are colorful, but don't require you to be able to identify the colors yourself, or maybe have to pull out your Sharpie like I often do to mark up the game so that I can play them. If you're looking for a game like that, if you're looking for a game that will, it is nice to have bigger solo games. I have played a lot of solo this year. Most of my family isn't that into board games. And so during lockdown, I've been mostly playing solo or been playing over video, online with friends. And so to have it's nice to spread something out. It's not just a little roll and ride. It's something a little bigger and meatier to do as a solo play. Sometimes even in the same room, my family is playing video games or watching a movie or something. So if you're looking for something like that, I'd say this game is for you.
And I want to, before we close out, I will add, I think you make a great point. I mean, this game is in the top 100 for strategy too. So it really is a perfect mix. I think if you're looking for something for the gamer who wants a game that they can also play with their family, but also bring the game night, it is actually a great matchup. I think like you, I don't get too stuck to the cat piece of it either. In terms of like the whole grander story, the general idea of we're rescuing cats and we're bringing them to this ship and it's a strategy puzzle. And I mean, that quick summary that I can give someone that kind of describes it effectively enough for me that, and I can get it to the table because when people see it, they're like, oh, wow, this is cool. Let's play this. And it doesn't just look good. It plays well, which is not always the case. So that's where the real win for me is with this. But yeah, strategy is definitely high in this game. Replayability is high. Teachability is pretty reasonable. I'd argue by second game I'd argue second game are going to be 10 times better. But I could say that with a lot of games. I just think this one for maybe younger group, you might take a game or two for them to really completely grasp it, but I think they're going to. So yeah, that's definitely my take.
Yeah. I think it's good. I would say I learned it pretty well. I have a habit of punching my game and watching a video of a playthrough when I punch it. And so I think by the time I had the game punched and watched one, 20-minute playthrough or something, I feel like I had a pretty good sense of how the game would play. And then I was able to go through and play a solo version of the game using the rule book. Like that's kind of the way that I try to do it often. And I feel like it played well. And that hasn't always been the case this year, trying to do solo games that I haven't played before. I've struggled with a couple, but this is one that worked out really well. So that's another one. If you're by yourself and you're wanting to play a game but you don't have someone to teach it to you, which is usually my favorite way to learn is to have somebody teach. This is definitely a watch a video, read the rule book, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to everyone for watching tonight. Again, this was not meant to be an exact, here's how you play video. If you're looking for more of those, there's a ton of great ones out there. Eventually, when I've got the equipment for that, I will be planning on doing more of those with great people like Brian, like Ryan, who you've seen on the channel, and so many others. I hope you'll take a moment, however, and also go check out last week's conversation on Creators Corner with Frank West. Frank was really awesome. And as Frank talked about this game, I just have to tell you, I loved it. And Frank in particular, for anyone tuning in, should know that he came in at like 12:30, 1:30 his time to chat with me. So you want to talk about dedication of a designer to his craft and his love of that industry. Like, I mean, props where that goes too. But thank you for watching. Brian, thank you for joining me and sharing your experience with the game. If you have any questions about the game, please leave them in the comments on YouTube or wherever else you saw this, and we'll be happy to certainly answer some of those questions and help you decide if this is a game for you. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you for coming aboard the Tabletop Express. Next video on this channel will be Monday as Marvel Monday, and we kick off with a conversation about Groot, Rocket, and all that good stuff from the latest expansion. And other than that, have a great evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.